The world is being shaken by the pandemic caused by the new coronavirus, and Japan is not an exception. Schools closed, events cancelled, travel restricted. The virus has drastically reshaped our everyday lives. The virus has not only infected many individual persons, but it has also managed to infect the economy. It is crucial to understand how the virus spreads and how we can protect ourselves against it. But it is equally crucial to understand the economic consequences that often are the catalysts that move history. A large portion that I will talk about in this video don't only concern Japan, but applies around the globe, as the way many developed country economies operate are from the same playbook. Let's get into it. First, let's get one thing clear. The economic chaos we are seeing is not happening exclusively due to the coronavirus. It is a much more truthful representation to think that the structure and the practices of our economic system has been accumulating risks for many years now. And the coronavirus was only the match that exploded this barrel full of gunpowder. The previous financial crisis that happened in 2008 was resolved by central bank stimulus. This was like slapping a piece of duct tape on the bottom of a sinking ship. This time the nature of the crisis is a little different, but the actions of the central banks around the world are almost identical to the last one. Unlike last time, however, the pin that pricked the bubble attacked directly the so-called real economy. As people take precautions not to go outside and spend, the direct result is that many local businesses, mostly small, can't withstand the loss of cash flow. Our economies are largely dependent on domestic consumption. So when this economic activity is hindered, the consequences quickly multiply. I compared our economies to a barrel full of gunpowder. This gunpowder represents the debts of individuals, corporations, municipalities, and governments. It is the fractional banking system that only holds a few percent of reserves compared to our deposits. Or no reserves at all, as the regulation was revised lately. In essence, the banks are insolvent and are able to keep operating only due to central banks pumping more cash into them, and on the condition that the majority of people won't take notice to this. The gunpowder is also our underfunded liabilities, for example our pension funds. It also represents the over-levered investors and institutions that have acquired assets on debt, and should these assets fall, so will they. A prime example of this kind of domino effect leveraging is happening around the Softbank Vision Fund. As a venture capital, they have invested about $100 billion in various startup companies, the most famous being WeWork. WeWork in itself has enormous debt loads, as it has not managed to occupy a sufficient portion of its office space, and we can assume that the coronavirus will make the situation even worse. Softbank, on the other hand, has received financing from many banks and individuals, with Mizuho Bank, Mitsui Sumitomo Bank, and Mitsubishi UFJ Bank being the top lenders in Japan. To receive this lending, Softbank Group has pledged Softbank Corporation stock as collateral, meaning that if the stock price falls, the banks will ask Softbank Group to put in more collateral, or they can liquidate these stocks. Now we can see how all of these entities are linked to each other, and how a failure for one can cause problems for the whole chain. And this is only a simplification of the entire structure, which most likely has more moving parts and connections. So this is the system we have created through many years, and the spark to ignite the proverbial gunpowder barrel could have been anything. So why are the central banks and governments fighting this crisis as if their life depended on it? To answer that question, let's see what would happen if they failed. As you may have heard, the central banks are considered to be the lender of the last resort. Whenever a bank or a company that is deemed too big to fail is on the verge of bankruptcy, the central banks activate and lend them money. Kind of like using a cheat code in a game. The central banks have the ability to magically create currency from nothing, which they can then push to the markets to keep the economy going. If you are interested in how this process works in the detail, please go and watch The Hidden Secrets of Money episode 4 by Mike Maloney. So should the central banks fail to keep our bubble economy inflated, we could fall into something called the deflation spiral. In this scenario, everything deflates. Stocks, bonds, real estate, wages, consumer prices, everything goes down, resulting in asset holders facing a reality check as their paper wealth evaporates before their eyes. Remember that asset holders are not only those top hat and monocle wearing elites, but workers that are participating in pension funds, insurance companies, and normal households. This deflation spiral is like experiencing the withdrawal symptoms from drug use. Suddenly everyone is poorer, which leads to them cutting spending, and when spending decreases, more companies go bankrupt, people lose their jobs, and so a feedback loop is created. The deflation spiral is an opposite reaction to the inflationary policies that have been taken by central banks. The traditional Keynesian economics recommend that the deflation should be fought by all means through government intervention, such as public spending projects and central bank stimulus. This can seem like a good idea at first, but when we consider that the government has to first siphon the capital from someone in order to spend it, the net effect is usually negative. As the government don't face the same difficulties in raising production capital as private entrepreneurs, it is much easier to start public projects that are economically not viable, producing malinvestments that are exposed in the future. The capital the government uses for these projects are taken from taxes, reducing the available capital of the public, or the capital can be procured from the central bank printer, in which case the existing currency is devalued, thus forcing the public to pay through inflation. The whole point is that the more government intervenes by launching public projects, forcing companies to keep wages high, forcing banks to extend credit, the longer and more severe the healing process ends up being. The deflation happens because of the excess that was created during the inflationary, so-called good times. And it is impossible to have a recovery without first letting the economy adjust. In the next video, we will take a look at the Bank of Japan and the government of Japan to see how they are intervening in the markets and ultimately creating the biggest economical crash in our lifetimes. See you in the next video.